You know, when you talk about the history of hockey, you just have to talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, they're one of the most valuable, most passionate franchises in all of sports. But man, are they a paradox. Their whole story is this wild ride of incredible highs and some of the most agonizing lows you can imagine.
And really, this slide right here gets to the very heart of the Leafs story. On one hand, you've got 13 Stanley Cups. 13! That's the legacy of a true dynasty, second only to their biggest rivals, the Canadiens. But then on the other hand, a 57-year championship drought, the longest in the entire league. So how can a team be both a titan and a tragedy? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack here.
Okay, so where does it all begin? Well, believe it or not, the story doesn't start with some grand noble vision for a hockey team. Nope. It all starts with a bitter business feud. The team's existence, and heck, the NHL itself, basically came about because a bunch of owners in an older league got fed up and wanted to ditch one particularly difficult guy.
And that chaotic start is really reflected in the team's first decade. I mean, it was a mess. They started out as the Toronto Arenas, and get this, they won the Stanley Cup in the NHL's very first season. But then financial trouble hit, and they got sold and rebranded as the Toronto St. Patrick's. It wasn't until 1927 that they finally became the Maple Leafs we know today. Think about that, 3 different names in just 10 years. A pretty wild start, right?
So yeah, first they were the Toronto Arenas, who, like I said, were champs right out of the gate in that 1917-18 season. Then they became the St. Patrick's. They went with this whole green and white theme, which is a pretty smart move to appeal to the city's large Irish population. And hey, it worked. They even grabbed another cup in 1922.
But by 1927, things were looking grim again. The franchise was this close to being sold and moved to Philadelphia, it was almost over. But then a man named Conn Smythe stepped in. He rallied a group, bought the team, kept it in Toronto, and basically created the identity that the team still has to this very day.
You see, Conn Smythe wasn't just some suit. He was a war veteran, and that experience shaped everything. He's the one who renamed the team the Maple Leafs, and it was in honor of the badge worn by Canadian soldiers back in World War I. So for him, it wasn't just a logo on a sweater. It was a symbol of courage, of grit, of national pride. It gave the team a powerful identity right from the jump.
And talk about ambition, just think about this. It's the middle of the Great Depression, right? And Smythe somehow manages to get Maple Leaf Gardens built in just over 5 months. 5 months! That's just an audacious, incredible feat. And it gave the team its legendary home, a building that would pretty much be the center of the hockey universe for the next 70 years.
And inside that cathedral of hockey, some serious legends were born. And maybe no legend is bigger than what happened in the 1942 Stanley Cup final. The Leafs were down 3-0 against Detroit. I mean, it's over, right? Nobody comes back from that. But then, the impossible happened. They stormed back, won 4 straight games, and pulled off the first and only reverse sweep in the history of the Stanley Cup final. To this day, it's the comeback that defines what resilience means in sports.
And that incredible spirit just kept on rolling. After World War II, the Leafs became an absolute juggernaut, a true dynasty. From 1947 to 1951, they were pretty much unstoppable. They won the Stanley Cup 4 times in 5 seasons, and that included a 3-peat. They were, without a doubt, the class of the NHL.
But you know how these stories go. Right at the absolute peak of all that glory, a tragedy struck. It's something that would become a huge piece of the team's folklore, and it really marked the beginning of a strange and difficult decade.
So here's what happened. A defenseman named Bill Baralico scores the overtime goal to win the cup in '51. He's the hero. Just 4 months later, he goes on a fishing trip, and his plane vanishes in northern Ontario. He's gone. For the next 11 years, the Leafs just couldn't win another championship. And this legend, the Baralico curse, just grew and grew. Then, in 1962, the Leafs finally win the cup again. And just a few weeks later, the wreckage of his plane is discovered. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's an absolutely haunting story.
So, with the curse apparently lifted, the Leafs launched into their final great dynasty. They reeled off 3 straight championships from '62 to '64, and this era was all about incredible toughness. I mean, listen to this. In the '64 final, a defenseman, Bob Baughan, takes a slap shot off his leg and gets carried off on a stretcher. He then comes back into the game and scores the overtime winner on a broken ankle. Just unbelievable grit.
Okay,
So this whole amazing run of toughness and titles all comes to a head in 1967. By this point, the team was getting old. They were considered total underdogs against their rivals, the powerhouse Montreal Canadiens. But in Canada's centennial year, this old, gritty Leafs team somehow pulled off one last incredible upset, and they won the Stanley Cup.
And that was it. That was the last time. They haven't won since. That moment was the end of an era and the start of a drought that has now stretched for more than half a century. So, what happened? What came after all those glory years? Well, what followed can really only be described as a black hole. And it was largely thanks to one man, the infamous and controversial owner Harold Ballard, who took over in the 1970s.
The Ballard era, well, it was a total disaster. It was just defined by chaos. The guy was eccentric, he was notoriously cheap, and honestly, it seemed like he cared way more about his own ego than about the team winning. He got into public fights with his own star players, he traded away fan favorites over petty disagreements, and he basically let a proud, historic franchise just crumble into one of the worst teams in the league.
So, just how low did they sink? Get this, the league's playoff format back then was so weirdly structured that the Leafs actually made the playoffs a couple of times with one of the worst records in the league. All they had to do was not be the absolute bottom team in a really, really weak division. It was basically mediocrity by default.
Finally, after Ballard's death in 1990, the franchise could start a new chapter. And really, it's been this never-ending, 3-decade-long quest to get back to the glory days. A journey filled with some incredible moments of hope and, of course, some absolutely profound heartbreak. The early 90s, though, felt like a true renaissance. Led by the fiery, passionate Doug Gilmour, the Leafs were suddenly contenders again. The whole city was electric. They played with a kind of heart that fans hadn't seen in years, and they clawed their way right to the brink of the Stanley Cup final. But that brink, that's where the heartbreak came crashing down. It's Game 6 of the conference finals against LA. Wayne Gretzky, high sticks, Doug Gilmour right in the face in overtime. It's a clear-as-day penalty, but the ref doesn't call it. A few moments later, Gretzky scores. The Kings win the game, and they go on to win the series in Game 7. For every single Leafs fan, it is the ultimate what-if moment. And that really brings us to today. This is a franchise that has seen it all. Dynasties, curses, miracles, complete mismanagement. It's a history unlike any other in sports. And so, the one question that still haunts one of the biggest, most loyal fan bases in the world remains. After all the glory and all the grief, can this team finally rewrite their ending and write a new championship chapter?